What's up, guys? Nathan here with Blue Oak. I'm going to do a video on a passage of 1 Corinthians that I was reading this morning. That's something I want to do with this channel, and I apologize to anybody who's not interested. Just tune me out. You don't have to watch these videos. I'll make it clear in the title when these videos are related to Scripture. But I got to give God His due. The Lord has blessed me tremendously, and I started my company with the main intention of wanting to honor the Lord. If I stray from that, then I've missed everything. Okay? So I'm under a firm conviction to honor the Lord with everything that I have, be it my marriage, my home, my truck, my business, and so on. So, I don't care if it's not popular. I don't care if we lose subscribers. We're going to do it. This is 1 Corinthians 10. And if you don't know much about the Bible, I really encourage you to listen. I'm wanting you to be here right now. Let me give you a little bit of context. Corinthians is a letter written to the church of Corinth by the Apostle Paul. A little bit of backstory on Paul, not to go too deep into this, but Paul was formerly known as Saul of Tarsus, and this is a character in the Bible who shows up in the book of Acts as an enemy of Christianity, an enemy of Jesus. He didn't believe that Jesus was the Messiah, and he thought that the church, these new Christians, were essentially a cult. And he tried to persecute them to death like rabid animals because he considered them a threat to real Judaism, like the truth of God's law. He was very zealous for God, but he just didn't recognize Christianity as legitimate. So he meant well, but he was out for blood, and then the Lord revealed Himself to him and changed his life and totally transformed him. And he became a missionary, evangelist, apostle, and he is responsible now for writing the majority of the New Testament. So he wrote, for example, Romans, Ephesians, Corinthians, Titus, Timothy, Galatians, and so on. I mean, he wrote all these letters to the churches, and a lot of his exploits are recorded by Luke in the book of Acts. All right, so that's kind of who Paul is. And Corinth is a city that he evangelized to. I think he started a church here. And he has a lot of problems with Corinth as he travels away. Things kind of get chaotic while he's gone. He leaves people in charge. He sets up a church. He leaves in charge some elders. And then he goes and continues his missionary work, and false teachers kind of come in his absence and start stirring up division and causing problems. And so he writes letters. He writes 2 letters to Corinthians. That's what we have, 1st and 2nd Corinthians. All right, so this is a letter to them, and I'm way into it. I'm in chapter 10 already, so I'm skipping a lot of his earlier stuff in this letter. But he is going to tell them something that I think really is important for us as Christians today. So I just want to read it. This is the NASB version. Starting with chapter 10, he says, "For I do not want you to be unaware, brothers and sisters, that our fathers were all under the cloud, and they all passed through the sea, and they all were baptized into Moses in the cloud and in the sea. And they all ate the same spiritual food, and all drank the same spiritual drink, for they were drinking from a spiritual rock which followed them, and the rock was Christ." All right, so that's verses 1 through 4. What he's doing is he's setting up ancient Israel as a parallel to the modern believer in Christ. Okay, so you're a Christian, you identify as a Christian. Paul is setting up ancient Israel as a parallel to you. And he's saying These guys were in a faith relationship with God. They were under the cloud of God. They were baptized. Okay, symbolically baptized by going through the Red Sea, but he also says they were also baptized in this cloud of God. So they had a spiritual rebirth in a sense. They had a baptism, just like a modern Christian should have. And he says they were eating and drinking spiritual food and drink. They were partaking of a pre-runner to Christ, which was this rock in the wilderness that was giving them water. And he actually calls that Christ back in ancient Israel's time. So they're very much a parallel to us today. But verse 5, this is where it gets really interesting. He says, nevertheless, with most of them God was not pleased, for their dead bodies were spread out in the wilderness. Now, these things happened as examples for us, so that we would not crave evil things as they indeed craved them. Do not be idolaters, as some of them were. As it is written, the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. Nor are we to commit sexual immorality, as some of them did, and 23,000 fell in one day. Nor are we to put the Lord to the test, as some of them did, and were killed by the snakes. Nor grumble, as some of them did, and were killed by the destroyer. Now these things happened to them as an example, and they were written for our instruction, upon whom the ends of the ages have come. Therefore let the one who thinks he stands watch out that he does not fall. I'm going to pause it there and break this down. He's pointing out they were saved, they were in a faith relationship, they were being given things of God, God was providing for them in the wilderness. They're a parallel to Christianity, and they ultimately didn't make it to the promised land, that their bodies were scattered in the wilderness before they could get to the promised land. Okay, so look, once saved, always saved is not biblical. And I'm not going to say that you need to be insecure if you make one mistake or you're not perfect. You're going, you have to worry that you're going to lose your salvation. No, that's not being taught in the New Testament. But there is a serious teaching, a warning against falling away. We have the capacity to forsake our relationship with Jesus as humans. We can grow complacent. We can grow cold. We can let sin harden our hearts against our God. And to think otherwise is irresponsible at best. And Paul is making this analogy. He says in verse 12, therefore let the one who thinks he stands watch out, so that he does not fall. This is such a common theme throughout the New Testament, and this is just one passage that is kind of obscure. A lot of people, they reference Hebrews 6, Hebrews 10, but there's so many passages throughout the scriptures. And Hebrews does the same thing here, especially in chapters 3 and 4. It draws a parallel between ancient Israel and the modern Christian. But a lot of people try to dismiss Hebrews and say that it doesn't apply because Hebrews was written to Jews and not to Christians. That's a faulty argument on its own. But this is Corinthians, and it is the same argument that's put forth in Hebrews. And so you can't dismiss Corinthians, because Corinthians is clearly written to Gentiles. So it applies to us. And why am I saying this? I'm not trying to offend anyone. I'm not trying to make anybody feel insecure. But I'm going to draw an analogy to tree work. Since my channel is all about tree work, let's draw an analogy. If I have no fear in my job, then I'm asking for an accident. Okay? Now, you don't want to be debilitated with fear, and you'll never get anything done. But you have to have a healthy respect for what's going on. The most dangerous types of employees are the ones who think that they can't make a mistake. The ones who think that they can be complacent and everything will be just fine, right? It's the same with our faith. Like, I just need to take this seriously. God is a loving God. He's a good God. He's an understanding God. He is compassionate towards me when I fall short. But I still have to be invested in this relationship, okay? I mean, like, when I'm doing a job for a client, and it's a little different for me because I'm actually a boss, so I own the company, but I'm not the boss ever on any job because the client is actually the boss. So I enter into a faith relationship with these clients. And some clients are cooler than others, but I'll tell you what, every client would be really mad at me if I took my position with them as their subcontractor for granted. And I just was like, you know what, no matter what I do on your job site, you're going to be cool with me and you're still going to pay me. No matter what I do. It's because you're a great client, you know? And if I just started being careless and reckless and thrashing their property and making huge mistakes, they're not going to pay me. That's going to violate our covenant. Even if they were totally willing to pay me, they were willing to, hire me and give me money to do a job for them, it's going to all be kind of thrown out the window if I don't have a healthy respect for our relationship, okay? So God is like the boss that we are to work for, but that's one way of thinking of him that's shown in the New Testament. But he's also a loving father, and he's also like a husband to the church. Jesus is, I guess the church is the bride to be of Christ, whereas God is referenced as a husband to ancient Israel. So anyways, the Bible uses all these different analogies that borrow from human relationships so that we can sort of understand. Hey, stop it. Go lie down. Sorry, dog and cat are going at it. So that we can understand. It draws from human analogies, human relationships, and it kind of shows us that God encapsulates all of these relationships, but in a good way. Like he has a relationship with humanity the same way a teacher has a relationship with a student, or the same way a boss has a relationship with an employee, or the same way a general has a relationship with a soldier, or a husband has a relationship with a wife, and a parent has a relationship with a child, and so on. But notice that God is always in the superior role here, okay? And to just hone in on one of those relationships and try to draw all the conclusions that you can about, well, this is God's character from this one idea of a relationship, that would be a mistake. Okay, for example, I can't draw from the case of like God is a general and I'm a soldier, because I mean that's true. That there's part of that analogy throughout the scriptures, but it's not limited to just that one example. And to focus only on that one example would be a mistake, because I'm neglecting the fatherly love and the compassion that is also present in him. On the flip side, it would also be a mistake to think of God as only loving and having no form of justice. Loving in the way that we think of it, because God's love is not the same as worldly love. Okay, his love rejoices with the truth. His love does not delight in evil. And so we have to weigh that. All right, I'm starting to ramble here. Hopefully this is insightful. The main thing I wanted to share was, and hopefully these videos, when I do these videos, they won't go on super long. And that way they're edifying to other people and respecting people's time. The main thing I wanted to share is Corinthians is giving us a warning and a parallel. Don't be like ancient Israel. And he gives some examples. He gives the example of idolatry, sexual immorality, grumbling against the Lord, and putting the Lord to the test. Okay? And he gives these harsh examples of how they were killed for that. This is all back in the books of Exodus and Numbers, the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible. We have, again, I'm going to say this, we have a very merciful God, and we have Jesus as our high priest, and he mediates for us. So we do not need to feel insecure, and we don't have to be like under this intense burden of like, if I don't do everything perfectly, then I'm going to be disowned. No, it's the same with my tree work. When I have a good understanding client, he understands, or she understands, that I'm not going to be able to do everything completely perfectly for their job site. But they can see that I'm doing the best that I can for them, and they love that about me. Okay? And if that's an imperfect human being, imagine how much more amazing God views us. God views us with a sense of compassion, and he sees that when we're doing our best, he's pleased with that. But we just need to stay the course, is all I'm saying. Stay the course, and if you think you're saved, then that's great. But watch out, lest you fall. Okay? Stay the course till the end, according to 1 Corinthians 10. And you guys be blessed.